Hi guys, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining live on the Private Property podcast. This is the first episode and I hope you're just excited as I am. Um, yeah, I think maybe by means of introduction is, my name is Mbali Nwoko and I'm a farmer. I'm standing here at my farm in Babsfontein, and my farm is called Green Terrace. And I thought I should start off by telling you a bit about myself and my story. Firstly, in terms of why I decided to start farming and why it is I'm a farmer. And so, firstly, back in 2016, I met a friend of mine. Uh, he was a stranger then, but a friend today, and his name is Eric Mawane. We were at an entrepreneur's workshop, and you know how you introduce yourself next to the person that you're sitting, like, hi, how are you, what business do you do, you know? And yeah, so we started chatting and he introduced himself to me and told me that he was a farmer and his intention was to start piggery farming. However, you know, he was starting to grow crops, vegetable crops, to sustain his piggery business. And so, yeah, I found it quite interesting that he decided to do farming because he told me that he was an engineer before. So I really was intrigued by the whole concept of farming. I thought you had to be a multimillionaire to be a farmer. And so I started asking Eric, you know, how did you get into the industry? Why is he planting vegetables and who is he selling to? And I was hooked from that conversation around farming. I went home, I did my research about it and decided, okay, this is something that I really wanted to do. I had a previous business before that. And so I started out looking for land simply because at that point in time, it was quite an impromptu decision. I incorporated Green Terrace in 2016, and the first step was really to look for land. And that's pretty much the topic for today, how to find land for farming. My process and my journey was quite easy. To be quite honest with you. And I think I was just at the right place at the right time. I started driving around farming communities and just asking the farmers or anybody who I could spot in a plot or in a farm or in what looked like a farm, in my opinion, and started asking, you know, if I could speak to the owner. This is if I was speaking to an employee. So I wanted to find out if I could speak to the owner, get to know, how they got the land, or maybe if there's any additional portions on their farm that I could rent out for starters, because I didn't have enough capital to buy a farm outright. And I really wanted something small where I could just start and gradually grow. And so I drove around the east of Johannesburg in an area called Boksburg in Mapleton to be exact. And I found a farm where the landlord or the owner was looking to start renting out her farm because she was a retired teacher and felt that, you know, she couldn't carry on farming anymore. And so in her farm, she was so kind enough to lease out about 2 hectares, and that's where I started. And my first crop was spinach, which I put on the ground in 2016. And having said that, I signed a 2-hectare lease. I think it was for about 3 years, and then a couple of months later, she just saw my progress and just really saw my passion and determination to really make farming a success. And she was kind enough to just say, Mbali, you know what, let me extend the lease for you, and also instead of farming 2 hectares or leasing 2 hectares, maybe look at renting the entire farm. And that was fantastic for me because now I had bigger piece of land, I could employ more people, and I was just excited that, wow, I've got a farm, you know, and I'm finally farming. So that's pretty much how my journey started. And yeah, we'll talk about the rest, but I really want to focus on today's topic, how to find land for farming, which a lot of people ask me, and I'm sure a number of farmers also get this question as well. How to find land for farming. And if you're first generation farmer like myself, or soon to be farmer like myself, who firstly didn't have land or money to buy a farm outright, I would definitely say start finding a farm that you could rent. Start with a leased or rented farm. Make sure that the agreements are quite favorable and both you and the owner are willing to negotiate on good terms. That could obviously benefit both of you guys. But because this is private property, and I've mentioned this in a couple of blogs and a few videos, is that when you go onto the private property site, there are farms available for sale that you could that are listed on the website, and you have two options: whether to look for a farm for sale or vacant land for sale. And just know that when you're going to pick out vacant land, you need to know that you have to budget for investment that you'll have to make on that farm, because there's things like infrastructure that you have to put on, whether it's tunnels, shade net, boreholes, buildings, fence, gates, and all these things. So it's literally starting a farm from scratch. However, then there's farms for sale. And my strategy would be, there's really not a lot of farms online that are available for rent. You hardly find those unless you do what I did, like literally travel around farming communities and see if you could speak to some farmers and see if you can negotiate favorable terms to rent onto their farm. However, what you'll mostly find online is farms for sale. There are plenty of farms for sale in and around Johannesburg, in a number of different provinces as well. And so my best bet for you is just to go onto those properties, see what might fit your budget. Even though you know that you don't want to buy a farm, maybe get in touch with the agent and see if they can introduce you to the owner if possible. And then see if the owner would be willing to rent the farm out for you. Sometimes there are farms that are like, 10 hectares or more, 50 hectares, where you'd find that the owners living on the property are really only using about a hectare or two if they're not farming themselves. So I think just go out and see what you could come up with and what negotiations you can have with the property owners to see if you could rent. So I spoke about buying a farm, renting a farm, finding a farm online. My other alternative as well, besides driving around farming communities and trying to see if you could find a farm for rent, I would definitely say that if you are an individual who's inherited land. So for example, there are a couple of people who've sent me emails and said, I'm living in Joburg and working in Johannesburg, and I've got land back in the Eastern Cape or KZN or wherever they come from in the rural areas, and they've got land that they've inherited from their great-grandfathers or their parents who've just recently passed on, and are curious in terms of how can I develop and convert this this land that I've inherited into a farm. So I usually say two things. If it was a farm before, maybe go back and speak to the workers that are working there, get to understand how it is that they were managing the farm or running the farm before that, and try seek interventions in where you can become involved and really grow that family business or the business in essence. However, if you really want to develop that farm, just know that you're going to have to make a personal decision on whether or not to relocate, because farming is quite difficult and intensive, and you really need to be hands-on. I cannot stress that enough. I don't care which type of farming you do or which form of farming you do. You really have to be hands-on, especially in the early stages. So if you're inheriting land and you really want to turn that piece of property into a farm, then you're one of the fortunate ones, because the farm is under your name. Definitely make sure that from a legal point of view, you have a title deed that you can keep on hand. And perhaps use it as collateral someday when you're trying to raise finance. And then another way that people find farms, and a number of farmers that I know have gone about it this way, where they might have, they would be a child of a specific community in the rural areas, of a specific clan or of a specific surname, etc. And when you go and speak to the chief, then they're willing to extend a piece of land or a portion of land out to you, simply because your great-grandfather, your family is part of that community, even though you might have relocated. So a number of other farmers, in terms of how they access land, is really speaking to the chiefs or the local community or tribal community, and trying to strike a deal then to say, I would like to farm here. And then you really have to position yourself quite well in terms of how you're going to create employment for the people in the community, because employment today is quite high. You also need to look at things like how you're going to bring value and economic development. I know it sounds like a huge responsibility, but how are you going to bring value and economic development in the neighboring community? Because you might find that when you start a farm in that area, you might really push other businesses to flourish as well. So these are the conversations that you have to have with the chief, and just hear out what their terms and conditions are. But usually that form of avenue is also another cheaper way to get land for farming, simply because most of the time they really don't want certain financial compensation. If it is, it's quite minimal. So it's like a minimal monthly rent. However, sometimes they just give you a receipt or a confirmation or a piece of paper acknowledging that you are farming X amount of hectares in this community, and these are the conditions for you to keep this farm, and there you go. So I hope I've touched on quite a number of ways to help you find land for farmings. And just to recap once again, it's about buying land if you've got the capital to buy a farm outright. Renting is a definite option that I would suggest, simply because, especially if you're starting out, you just want to trial your new farm business on land that maybe is not too much attached to you, because having an asset also requires immense amount of responsibility. So renting is the best option to see if this thing is for you, really, because farming is not for everybody. And also you could rent land for a specific season. So if you want to plant maize, for example, you could just rent land for the first season for maize to see if this is the crop that you want to invest in or not. If you want to farm livestock as well, there's also conditions there. So really suss out and see what works for you. So renting, I think, would be the best option without having a physical asset attached to you that you're going to have to maintain for long term. If you're fortunate enough to have inherited land from family members, then that's also great as well. But make sure that you have a title deed, so that once you start developing the farm and you're making it an asset of value, you have a title deed showing all the infrastructure, all the improvements, and then in a couple of years down the line, or whenever you're ready to seek finance or raise capital or finance for your business, you could use that farm up as collateral. And then the other aspect also is to speak to the local chief or tribal community from where you grew up from. I know this one is mostly has to do with you being from the community, because charity begins at home, and they'd want to obviously give those opportunities to people from the community who are brought up from the community, and obviously seek ways in terms of creating employment and economic development in that community. So speaking to the local chief or tribal community as well is another form of way to getting land to farm. And then besides the online property searches, I think just be what's the word? Just be active and, go out and look for land. A lot of farmers put their farms up for sale. Sometimes it's not available on property sites, and you will only find that once you start driving around the farming communities. So like, I know in the East Rand, you have Babsfontein, Bronkhorstspruit, Dalmas, Sundra, and etc. There's a lot of farms in that area. In the West, Tarleton is a big area for farming as well. And then you have an area in the South, if I can just remember the name, by Walkerville in the South. Driving down towards Southgate, etc., or the Vaal, there's a lot of farms and plots available there as well. So, and then going back to the North, Rayton, Cullinan, Centurion, there's also a lot of plots, vacant land for sale. And this is specifically to speaking on Gauteng. And I can't really comment on much on other provinces, but I'm sure there's so much more land. So if you drive around those farming communities, you will see boards, farm for sale or plot for sale. Take a chance and go in there, introduce yourself, to the neighbor, obviously making sure that all safety protocols are adhered to. But yeah, just speak to the property owners, see if they're willing to rent out some land, or see if they're willing to um, um, sell you the farm, and it could be a buy to rent option. Whatever your goals are for farming, I think that's one of the best ways to really find land. So yeah, I'm happy to take any questions. This is a live. So yeah, feel free to comment below. I'm just going to have a look on my phone here. So yeah, happy to take any questions. However, this live will be available on YouTube, my YouTube channel, Mbali Nwoko, as well as Private Properties YouTube channel as well. So yeah, feel free to comment, and I will assist as best as I can. Thank you so much for tuning in. Wishing you all a good day ahead. Take care.